Welcome to Serenity Fire, the podcast where wellness meets grit. I'm your host, Krista Guigeni, founder of Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique. Join me as we dive into the intriguing world of biohacking, clean living, cutting-edge spa trends, and the hustle, grind, and grit of entrepreneurship. From my personal battles with weight management and infertility, through a 30-year struggle to create and launch my dream business, to building a sanctuary for those who have been touched by cancer, I'm here to share real talk, inspire big dreams, and spark a passion for holistic living inside each and every one of you. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Serenity Fire. I want to start today's episode by letting you know that I had to have some massive emergency dental work done last week. And so the right side of my face is so tender and swollen. I kind of look a little bit like a chipmunk. And if you see me smiling with a crooked smile throughout this episode, you'll understand why. So please just bear with me. But today we're going to be talking about one of the most confusing and controversial subjects in modern nutrition: processed foods versus ultra processed foods. Because after all, processed foods are definitely bad for you. At least that's what we've all been told. But what if that statement is not only oversimplified, but actually misleading? Well, here's the truth. Not all processed food is harmful, but a diet dominated by ultra-processed food is a completely different story. And if you've ever felt confused when walking through the supermarket or the grocery store, thinking, is this product actually healthy or is it just marketed really well? You're not alone. And today, we're going to fix all that confusion. There's actually a lot to talk about when it comes to this topic, so I'm going to split this into 2 episodes. And in the first one today, we're going to talk about what processed foods actually are, what they're not, the difference between processed and ultra-processed, and what happens inside the body when ultra-processed foods dominate your diet, and how this then shows up in your skin, hormones, inflammation, and metabolism. And in the second part of this mini-series, we're going to talk about what the MAHA movement is actually trying to accomplish, why this issue is so nuanced, what this means if you are low-carb, keto, or paleo, how to navigate grocery stores and restaurants, and how to think about products that technically fall into the ultra-processed category, but may still have a place in a high-functioning lifestyle. So this is going to be a very robust conversation, and I want to start with the most important reframe, and that is processing food is not inherently bad. In fact, it's something humans have done for thousands of years. Cooking is processing, fermenting is processing, freezing is processing, drying herbs, grinding grains, churning butter, and pressing olives into olive oil are all processing. And if processing were dangerous, we would not have survived as a species over all of these years and centuries. So when people say processed foods are bad, what they really should be saying is that certain types of modern, industrially processed foods may be problematic. That distinction really does matter because once you understand that food exists on a spectrum of processing, everything becomes clearer. This is one of the biggest points of confusion in the wellness space. People hear the word processed and they start thinking that anything not pulled directly from the ground or off the tree is somehow problematic. That is just not a useful framework. The issue is not whether food has been altered. The issue is how much has it been altered, why has it been altered, what was added or removed, and whether the alteration supports the body or works against it. So before we demonize processing, we need to understand the categories. There's a system used in nutritional science called the NOVA classification system, and it organizes food based on how much it has been altered from its original state. So let's walk through that system in real life terms. Level 1 would be whole or minimally processed foods. These are foods that are very close to how they exist in nature. Fresh fruits and vegetables, eggs, meat and fish, milk, nuts, beans, whole grains, plain potatoes, plain oats. They may be washed, cut, frozen, dried, or pasteurized, but the structure of the food is largely intact. This is what your body recognizes most easily. These foods still come with the architecture that nature built into them: fiber, water, protein structure, fat structure, micronutrients, and natural digestion resistance. And then there's level 2. This is going to be your processed culinary ingredients. These are things extracted from whole foods and used to prepare meals like olive oil, butter, honey, maple syrup, salt, vinegar. You do not typically eat these alone, unless you're me, because I love vinegar, but they are used in cooking, meal preparation, and seasoning. They are processed, yes, but they are not the same thing as ultra processed. And then we move into level 3, which is going to be your processed foods. Now we're combining foods. So some examples would be bread, cheese, plain yogurt, canned vegetables, pickles, smoked fish, simple soups. These foods usually contain a few added ingredients for preservation, flavor, or preparation. These are still real foods, and this is where a lot of wellness messages go wrong because people start fearing foods that are actually completely reasonable and can absolutely fit into a healthy, metabolically supportive diet. And then we move into level 4, which is going to be your ultra processed foods. This is the category driving most of the concern in all of the wellness spaces. Ultra processed foods are fundamentally different. These are industrial formulations made with ingredients you would not typically use at home, designed for shelf life, convenience, palatability, and repeat consumption, and often broken down, fractionated, reconstructed, flavored, colored, stabilized, and texturized. Some examples would include, as I'm sure you're probably already suspecting, soda, packaged snack foods, candy, fast foods, frozen ready meals, many protein bars, flavored yogurts with long additive lists, and many healthy low-carb products, many plant milks, many meal replacement drinks. And I'm going to show you some of these as we get through this 2-part episode. And here's the key. These foods are often no longer structurally recognizable as the original food. That doesn't mean that every ultra-processed food is equally harmful. We're going to get into that nuance here in just a little bit, but it does mean this category deserves a different level of scrutiny. So what makes ultra-processed foods so different? This is where things get really important and where, quite honestly, most conversations stop too early. Ultra-processed foods are not just more processed. They are engineered completely different. So the first thing that we look at is hyperpalatability. These are engineered cravings. These foods are often designed to hit what is called the bliss point. This is the perfect combination of sugar, fat, salt, and the combination overrides your satiety signals. It lights up reward pathways, and it makes you want to keep eating. It often makes stopping feel harder than it should. Have you ever had like a meal and then you're like, I just ate a whole meal. Why am I still hungry? This is why. You're not lacking discipline. The food is actually designed to make you keep eating more. That's a very difficult relationship to food than sitting down with a piece of salmon, roasted vegetables, and olive oil. And then when we look at what makes ultra-processed foods different, we also are looking at the structural breakdown. Whole foods contain fiber, cellular integrity, natural water content, and natural digestion resistance. Ultra-processed foods are often broken down, fractionated, reassembled, extruded, pulverized, refined, and rapidly absorbed, which leads to blood sugar spikes, energy crashes, increased hunger shortly after eating, less satiety, and more passive overconsumption. The structure of the food matters more than most people really realize. And then the other thing we want to look at when we're looking at what makes ultra-processed foods different is the additives and the cosmetic ingredients. These are ingredients added not for nourishment, but for things like texture, stability, shelf life, the way it feels in your mouth, color, aroma, repeatability, and consumer experience. Yes, that is actually a thing. And some examples would include emulsifiers, artificial flavors, stabilizers, thickeners, gums, modified starches, protein isolates, sweetener systems, and flavor systems. And one you may have seen is something called carrageenan. Carrageenan is a thickening agent derived from seaweed, which you would think would be good for you. But it's in processed foods, and it's often used to improve texture in things like nut milks, creamers, ice creams, and packaged dairy alternatives. There's ongoing debate about its impact on gut health and inflammation, and while not every person will react the same way, it is one example of an ingredient that exists primarily to create a certain food experience, not to nourish the body. And some research even suggests that certain additives and emulsifiers may disrupt the gut microbiome, increase intestinal permeability, and contribute to low-grade inflammation. And inflammation, which I believe is the root to all evil, is the common denominator in many of the issues people are dealing with today. Skin conditions, hormonal imbalances, autoimmune issues, insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction, and accelerated aging. So this is not just about calories. This is about the relationship between food structure, metabolic signaling, inflammation, and physiology. Now let's connect this to what we see clinically and inside the spa. When someone's diet is heavily composed of ultra-processed foods, we often see blood sugar dysregulation. So we're seeing frequent spikes and crashes, increased insulin demand, increased cortisol, reactive hunger, and more fat storage, especially in that abdominal area. And then there's hormonal disruptions, things like insulin resistance, increased inflammatory signaling, estrogen dysregulation, increased androgen activity in some cases, and more acne, oiliness, and hormonal skin issues. And then there are skin manifestations, and this shows up as chronic inflammation, congestion and breakouts, dull, uneven skin tone, puffiness, impaired barrier function, accelerated collagen breakdown, slower healing, and premature visible aging. You cannot out facial a chronically inflamed internal environment. And that is so important to understand because a lot of people are trying to solve system-wide inflammatory problems with surface level interventions only. But everything really does come from the inside out. And that's why treatments like lymphatic drainage, cold plunging, sauna therapy, especially traditional sauna and Himalayan salt sauna, anti-inflammatory skincare, corrective facials, and circulation supportive therapies are powerful, but they're amplifiers, they're not replacements. The internal environment always wins. And before we move forward, there's one more layer here that we need to talk about, and this is where this conversation becomes very real in terms of aging, skin quality, and long-term tissue integrity. There's a process called glycation. Glycation occurs when excess glucose in the bloodstream binds to proteins, particularly collagen and elastin, and forms compounds called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. And this matters because ultra-processed foods tend to drive rapid blood sugar spikes. So what happens is this. You eat a highly refined ultra-processed food, your blood sugar rises quickly, and that excess glucose becomes binded to structural proteins in your body. Over time, this leads to stiffening of collagen, loss of elasticity, fine lines and sagging, dull, uneven skin tone, increased oxidative stress, and increased inflammation. And in the treatment room, that's exactly what we see. So when we talk about aging, this is not just about skincare, it's about biochemistry. And ultra-processed foods absolutely accelerate that process. Now, I want to clarify something I said earlier because it's important. I mentioned that our treatments act as amplifiers. And what I mean by that is that an amplifier enhances what is already happening inside the body. So if your internal environment is relatively stable, meaning blood sugar is regulated, inflammation's controlled, nutrient status is strong, sleep and recovery are decent, and the nervous system is not in a constant state of stress, then treatments like lymphatic drainage, sauna, cold plunge, and advanced facials can produce incredible, visible, and lasting results. But if the internal environment is dysregulated, if there's chronic inflammation, glycation, blood sugar instability, high stress, and poor metabolic resistance, then those same treatments will still help, but the results will be limited and often temporary. Because external treatments work on the surface and tissue level, internal physiology operates at the cellular and biochemical level. I think one exception there would be when you're doing LED whole body therapy and hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because those therapies do absolutely work from the inside out, but you still need to be thinking about what you're putting in your body and what's going on internally. And there's a hierarchy here. Your internal environment, your hormones, your glucose levels, your inflammatory state, your nutrient reserves, your nervous system tone, that always takes precedence. So when I say the internal environment always wins, what I mean is we can support, enhance, and accelerate results externally, but we cannot override internal dysfunction indefinitely. Now, that being said, these therapies absolutely play a role, and you know that I'm a firm believer in all of them. So let's break down what they're actually doing. Lymphatic drainage is going to help remove stagnant fluid and support the removal of inflammatory byproducts and metabolic waste. In the context of a body under inflammatory load, this can help reduce puffiness, stagnation, and congestion. Cold exposure with things like cold plunging can help regulate inflammation, influence the nervous system, and may improve metabolic signaling and insulin sensitivity in some individuals. It can also help build resilience and reduce inflammatory reactivity. And then when you look at sauna therapy, it increases circulation, supports detoxification pathways, promotes sweating, and activates heat shock proteins, which assist in cellular repair and adaptation. It's also profoundly supportive for circulation, recovery, and nervous system balance when used appropriately. And when you're going into a Himalayan salt sauna, like what we have at Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique, then you're getting even additional added benefit For example, the Himalayan salt adds over 80 healing minerals that are great for skin and respiratory conditions. And then finally, when we're looking at advanced skincare and facials, these treatments help stimulate collagen, improve circulation, support barrier repair, and improve visible damage at the skin level. So these therapies are incredibly valuable, but they work best when they're aligned with what is happening internally. That's what I mean when I say our treatments are amplifiers. They can make a good internal environment look exceptional. They can help a struggling internal environment look better temporarily, but they cannot consistently outperform biology. So the whole package is important. So today we laid the foundation. We talked about what processed foods actually are, what makes ultra-processed foods different, how they affect blood sugar, inflammation, hormones, and skin, and why you truly cannot out-treat a chronically inflamed internal environment. And if there's one takeaway I want to leave with you from this first part of this series, it's this. The issue is not that food has been processed. The issue is what has been done to that food and what that processing is doing to your physiology. In part 2 of this series, we're going to go deeper into the real-world application of all of this. We're going to talk about the MAHA movement and why this issue has become so politically and culturally significant, how to think about the nuance around so-called good ultra-processed foods, what this means if you're on a low-carb keto or paleo diet, how to navigate grocery stores and restaurants, and how to tell whether products are actually supporting your body or just marketed to sound like they are. So if today gave you the physiology, part 2 is going to give you the framework, and I'll look forward to seeing you there. Okay, that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me on Serenity and Fire today. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who is on their own journey to being their healthiest selves. And as always, please connect with me on Instagram, visit us at Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique, or explore more episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, keep balancing Serenity with Fire. I'm Krista Guageni, and I'll talk with you more in our next episode. At Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique, we don't just offer traditional spa treatments. We create rituals that relax your mind, restore your health, and rejuvenate your spirit. From biohacking technologies to advanced oncology-trained care, everything we do is designed to help you heal on the deepest level with clean, holistic therapies, products, and amenities that are second to none. And right now, you can experience 2 of my favorites, our whole body LED light bed or hyperbaric oxygen therapies. And as a thank you for listening, you'll get 10% off your first session when you use the code Serenity10 at booking. What is your panacea? Let us help you find it, because true wellness isn't a quick fix, it's a ritual.